Welcome back for the fourth and final installment in the retrospective for the sixth console generation. Part 1, we talked about the Sega Dreamcast. Part 2, we talked about the PS2. And last week in Part 3, we talked about the Nintendo GameCube. This week, we talk about, in my opinion, a somewhat also underrated console. In Part 4, we finish up with the Microsoft original Xbox. Now, one thing about the Xbox is, hands down, easily the largest console that I can think of size wise. This thing, well, at least of ones that I personally own. But yeah, this thing is a juggernaut in size and weight. Of course, quite large. First up on the back, we have your basic stuff like power cord. We have where you would plug in your AV outlets and stuff. And then we also have a hookup, of course, to put in your line for dial up internet services. Since this console really was, in many ways, the successor to the Dreamcast from Sega. Of course, Microsoft developed the software using the Dreamcast, which was Windows CE software. Now, the original Xbox, much interestingly like the Sega Dreamcast and also like the GameCube, it would also have 4 control ports. Only 2 buttons, of course. You have your power button and then your open reject button. There was no normal like reset button or anything. Though the console would immediately reset once you open the disc slot, or tray rather. But yeah, this thing is a ridiculously huge. Now, one of the reasons, to be fair, why this was so big is because it was also the first home console designed with a built-in hard drive like a PC. This really was the first step of modern consoles being more like gaming PCs, more or less, I guess you could say. And one of the big things about the original Xbox is also the fact that it had a huge mod scene. Heck, to this day, there are people who still mod original Xboxes. It's really unique. Well, back quite a few years ago, I used to have a modded Xbox. Unfortunately, when I moved out of state for a few years and was living in Virginia, lost that Xbox, unfortunately, which sucks. That's the thing, whenever you move, make sure you do everything possible to keep tabs on everything. That's definitely a piece of advice. But the original Xbox was definitely revolutionary technology wise. It was far more powerful than anything else of the sixth console generation. Heck, it is more powerful than some stuff we saw in the seventh generation. The original Xbox really had so much untapped potential when it comes to power. And weight wise, boy, is this thing heavy as can be. I mean, you are talking about a lot of weight on this. And with that part, the original Xbox also originally was released with the oversized giant controller, nicknamed the Duke controller, which is definitely by far something I think quite a few people over the years have definitely become infamous. Hyperscan even did like a re-release wireless version of the Duke controller that you could buy. Personally, I'm glad I waited a few years because it would be around 2003, 2004 time frame when I would actually get an original Xbox. It'd be a couple years later. Glad I waited for more games to come out for it and titles, and I was happy because within like 1 year after I got it, I picked up what would become my personal favorite game on the original Xbox, and that being, of course, the original classic Fable. But with that said, there's a few interesting things that the Xbox did off and on. They would do some special like discs, bundles that you would get, of course, two games on one disc. Now, one version you had a combination of Sega GT 2001 along with Jet Set Radio Future double pack. Now, the one I actually got was a different double pack. It was the second double pack. And it came double packed with Star Wars Clone Wars and Tetris Worlds. Which to this day, I absolutely love. Specifically, as Star Wars Clone Wars is a pretty solid game, but I love Tetris Worlds. Fun little fact, Tetris is one of my personal favorite game series of all time. Tetris was actually what got me originally years back to even try Game Boy, was to play Tetris. Which, of course, funny enough, was also the launch title with the original Game Boy. But this is a game I've spent probably way more time than I'm willing to admit that I've played off and on the Tetris games. Though, personally for me, Tetris Worlds may be my personal favorite Tetris game out of all the ones I've played. Though, I still need to try out that crossover, Tetris Puyo Puyo. Because I've actually never played any of the Puyo Puyo games. So I'm definitely kind of curious. But this was one thing I always found kind of cool, these double packs like this, bundles. But this was the double pack bundle I got with my Xbox originally. Next up of stuff, we would see some interesting sports titles that overall would be released. Of course, Midway being one of the big ones, would release a interesting crossover title. Of course, we know Midway from the 5th/6th generation would do a really cool, awesome racing game, which I highly love, called, of course, Hydro Thunder. And we would see a somewhat sequel version of Hydro Thunder on the 360 years later. But they would do an interesting racing game where you raced with snowmobiles, and they would also add where you could use like machine gun and shoot missiles and stuff also in the game. So that was cool, actually combining an interesting thing like snowmobile racing, so some interesting elements of arcade racers like Hydro Thunder but on snow, and add in missiles and stuff, where the, of course, gimmick with Hydro Thunder was using turbo boosters. That's one of the things that made it very interesting. But if you've never actually played, seriously, try pick up a copy of Arctic Thunder. Even has Thunder in the title, but yeah, check out Arctic Thunder. It's a really interesting racing game. It's one of my personal favorites, honestly. I'm not a big traditional racing person outside of Forza Horizon and Hydro Thunder. Arctic Thunder is actually really fun and an interesting game, and it's a great game to play against other people on, because that's a pretty good split-screen co-op or multiplayer thing that you could play up to like 4 people on with split screen, which is pretty cool. It's a great party game if you want to play with friends. Next, we would see also some unique platformer games for the original Xbox, and one which was a console exclusive to the original Xbox, though nowadays you have like a remastered version on Switch and stuff. But this is a great game. I only recently started playing. I'll admit the soundtrack is beautiful. The gameplay is actually really solid, and I think for its age, it actually looks pretty good, at least compared to other 3D like action platformers of the same time period. And that being Sphinx and the Cursed Mummy. This is honestly a really cool game, very unique, and I love the puzzles involved in the platforming in this game. It's got some of, I think, my favorite puzzles I've played of platformers from this time period. It's easily one of the best looking platformers of the time, and if you were a fan of like the of that time period, if you were a fan of games like Prince of Persia: Sands of Time and things like that, but also 3D world platformers and stuff, give this game a shot. It's actually relatively still a very good deal, or if you want to play remastered, get it for the Nintendo Switch. But I do highly recommend this game. It is, unfortunately, in my opinion, a somewhat criminally underrated platformer. Also, we would see a direct physical release. Now, this did get released in PAL region of Europe and Japan, but it would not get a release on the Dreamcast here in the US and here in the West. So we had to wait for the original Xbox to get the sequel, and of course, that being Shenmue 2, which is a really interesting game. It would even add like full CG and stuff like style, bonus DVD included, because if you had the special Xbox remote and stuff, you could play DVDs on the original Xbox, just like PS2. So that was a cool little thing. Plus the fact you could also rip your music from your CDs onto the hard drive, and you could play that ripped music on selected games, specifically games like Tony Hawk. You could do like your custom music and stuff, and that was cool. Again, to like bring over at the time for me when I was big in the new metal, I ripped a lot of new metal music to listen to while playing Tony Hawk. And to be fair, the music suited Tony Hawk very well. But Shenmue 2 is a classic. Yeah, I'll admit, it's not the greatest game overall, hasn't aged the greatest, but it's one of those game series for me that holds a bit of a nostalgia because I grew up with Shenmue, so I'm a little biased. And yeah, I get why there's a lot of people that don't like the Shenmue games. I completely understand it. I personally still enjoy it for the simplicity and the novelty of it. Next, we would see a great exclusive third person action game based on, at the time, one of my favorite TV shows on TV. That being Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Based on, of course, the first few seasons, elements and things, story wise, of it, you would, of course, be fighting occasionally like Drusilla, Spike, and other characters from the show. And they got pretty much all the original voice casts and stuff of the actors and actresses who played in the Buffy series. And of course, they even managed to put on the cover art the original actress who played Buffy, and I still love this show to this day. It has really, I think, was a very solid written TV show, and I'm glad also, even to an extent, that Josh Whedon was involved in the first game. Now, I don't know much about any of the future, like the multi-platform sequel Buffy game. Never played it. I only played the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer game. Love the fact they even used in the opening to this game the original Buffy TV show theme music, which is great. One of the best TV show themes of all time in my view. But it's a great 3D action game. It has great mechanics, and I think you should give it a chance. The company that made this would also later on be involved in, of course, the reboot of the Killer Instinct series, which is honestly really cool. Then we would see many other games, but first quickly take a break and talk a bit about some great RPGs that were released on the console. One that I'm surprised more people don't talk about, this was actually my introduction to the Elder Scrolls series. It would be on the original Xbox, and it was with the Game of the Year edition, and that being Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, which included all of the expansion packs, physical on disc. See, that's the thing I miss about nowadays. Back when you could actually get a physical disc with all the expansion stuff on disc, not crappy, stupid DLC. Because that means even when servers are down, you can still play everything intact when it's physically on disc. But Morrowind is a game I highly recommend more people. Yeah, it definitely has a lot of frame rate hiccups here and there in the game, much like the original Fable had a lot of frame rate problems. But It doesn't change the fact it's still a solid game, and the fact you can easily get over 100 hours of gameplay out of this game, like pretty much any Elder Scrolls game, let's be honest. Like, Skyrim isn't anything special. I mean, yeah, it's massive, that's for sure, but Morrowind was definitely massive for the time period when it came out. It was unlike any other console RPG in size at the time. And if you liked really good, solid games, even though it maybe wasn't as great as the PC version, still for I think home console, Morrowind still is a really solid title, in my opinion, in the Elder Scrolls series. Though I think also I get a lot of people love Oblivion, but for me, Morrowind holds a special place. Some other stuff we would see of RPGs, we would see a lot of stuff actually come from, of course, BioWare at the time was really becoming an emerging big name. But first, we talk about I have the original Fable, but disc only 9 case. But then later on, we would get the Platinum Edition of Fable, and would also get the PC version released also, which had some improvements in my opinion on some of the frame rate stuff was improved on a little bit. Though I actually think I had some more frame rate issues with this version, but nevertheless, it is great. The Platinum Edition included all the extra DLC, which was released on PC, and of course would be renamed Fable The Lost Chapters, and then would get an HD treatment later on the 360 and be called Fable Anniversary. But Fable Lost Chapters, great game, and you would get like a new region added to the game that you could explore, and a special new ultimate final boss fight against a dragon version of the thought to be dead mass. I hate when I forget names. Jack of Blades. But seriously, if you've never played the original Fable, just do yourself a favor and try out Fable Lost Chapters. It's a great game. Yeah, you can beat it in under 20 hours if you want, but I always enjoy taking my time and just having fun, messing with everyone, and the magic was always a lot of fun to use, especially the lightning. There was something very just enjoyable about electrocuting people to death with lightning. Maybe I'm a little psycho when it comes to some games, but also, like I said, we would see also BioWare rise up in this time period with some amazing exclusives. Like, one, I'm surprised I don't hear more people talk about this game. In my opinion, this is a hidden gem from the 6th generation, Jade Empire. You can still get this game cheap as heck. I mean, you still can probably get this game for $10 or a little over $10. It's still very affordable, very reasonably priced, a great game to collect for. It has great, definitely storytelling. Maybe not as great as stuff later on we would see from obviously the console, but still, you could see a lot of elements which would play role later on in games like Dragon Age. Start out in this, though you could also see elements of like Fable heavily influencing also Jade Empire with the way some of the mechanics worked in the game. But it's still a really solid, great RPG experience, and I can't believe Microsoft has still, or BioWare and stuff, has still not remastered this game, because frankly, it deserves more love than it gets. Now we go on quickly to talk briefly about, in my opinion, the best Star Wars games of all time. And by the way, if you're a Star Wars fan, the original Xbox is probably one of the greatest consoles of all time. It has one of the largest libraries of Star Wars games of any console, no matter what. I mean, you have probably around 20 Star Wars games on the original Xbox, which is kind of crazy, and most of them you can still get very affordable. And this being two of, in my opinion, the greatest Star Wars games of all time, also two of the best RPGs of all time, in my opinion, on console. We have first, well, mentioned quickly, the sequel, which is still good, not as good as the first. Still great, that being, of course, Knights of the Old Republic 2, which had a great, in my opinion, one of the coolest designed Sith of all time, that being, of course, Darth Nihilus, which is a very interesting character. Then we have this beauty right here, Knights of the Old Republic 1, with on the cover art there, we have Darth Malak. The Old Republic era would introduce some of the greatest Star Wars characters of all time, like Darth Malak, Darth Malgus, Darth Nihilus. We would also see the introduction to the Great Emperor, the Great Dark Emperor, that would change bodies on occasion, specifically in the Old Republic, along with Malgus. We would also see introduction to characters like Lord Scourge, and of course, my all-time favorite Star Wars character, pretty much, and that being Revan. Revan, of course, the main character you play with in Knights of the Old Republic. Great character, very interesting as you get to know the backstory. The actual, like, in-game stuff with the whole light and dark side system does have its interesting stuff, like if you lean more towards the dark side, you will end up becoming more. Obviously, it will change and augment your facial looks and stuff, how people react to you, much like Fable. Because in Fable, when you turn more evil, you would get red eyes, you would get horns and stuff. So, and the fact you could also get special Sith abilities as you turn more to the dark side. But in my opinion, this is still the crowning jewel of Star Wars games. Quickly speed this up a bit, but mention a few more games in my opinion I think people should play. This game, which is known for its insane high difficulty, that being the original classic Ninja Gaiden, which has definitely become quite well known and infamous for its difficulty. For a good reason, because this is easily, in my opinion, probably in the top 10 hardest games of all time. For me, anyways, that I've played. Along with the original version of Devil May Cry 3, not the special edition. Trust me, if you play the original Devil May Cry 3, you would know what I'm talking about. But Ninja Gaiden, the original version for Xbox, yeah. This is a game that will have you raging quite a bit. Though the Ninja Gaiden series is quite infamous for its difficulty. This was a series known for its difficulty before Dark Souls existed. I mean, Ninja Gaiden goes all the way back to actually the NES. Also great games, if you are a big Silent Hill fan, I recommend, if you have an original Xbox or whatever, pick up Silent Hill 2 Restless Memories, because this has extra like content added to the story, extra like different behind the scenes additional like video clips and everything. Has a lot of extra content. Now it did get a release on PS2, but only outside of the US and Japan and stuff. If you want like the full complete package ultimate definitive version of the game, this is the definitive version to play, is the original Xbox version. It's also a lot cheaper. You can get the Xbox version for about half the price of the PS2 version. So, if you're looking for a good price, but you also love good horror games, heck, if you played Silent Hill 2 on the PS2 but never played the original Xbox version, you can. Give it a shot. I think you'll find interesting the extra content included. Also, we have, gonna save some of that for last. Also, we have some great, like many things. The original Xbox was a great console for fighting game fans like myself. One of the greatest things that they released was the Dead or Alive Ultimate Collection, which was a bundle which included remastered versions of Dead or Alive 1 and Dead or Alive 2. Which is really cool, because until this came out, I actually had never played the first Dead or Alive game, which was released on the PS1 and the Sega Saturn. Now, I did play the original version of DOA 2 on the Dreamcast, of course. Didn't care much for hardcore on the PS2. Ultimate is the definitive way, in my opinion, to play Dead or Alive 1 or 2. The fact you can get it double packed in this really cool box, and it has a lot of new and improved visuals and everything on Dead or Alive 2. Easily the best way to play either game in my opinion. And it comes in this beautiful art cover, which I love. And yeah, it had online features as well. Also, we would see released, of course, which would be one of the original launch titles, that being Dead or Alive 3, which still looks ridiculously good to this day. And in fact, this game is like 2 decades old almost 20 years old. The end of this year, it will be 20 years old, which is kind of hard to believe, or wait, no, 2002, yeah, so 19, whatever. But this would be the introduction to quite a few new characters in the series. Also, we would have some great music from Aerosmith on this game, like Amazing. We would see Home Tonight would be the ending credits song, which I think is a underrated Aerosmith song. And the beginning, we would see a song for the intro of this game. The song Nine Lives off their album from the 90s, Nine Lives. Really good song, probably one of their best harder songs in my opinion, and a somewhat underrated Aerosmith album in my view. But seriously, if you haven't played DOA 3, play it, pick it up. It's backwards compatible with like the 360 and stuff, so there's no problem there. And the game still plays insanely well to this day. Even how old it is, the game still plays just as good as ever. That's one thing about the DOA series. It's really never been super bad. Even DOA 2 on the Dreamcast still plays pretty solid compared to many other 2D or 3D fighters of that period. This and I think Tekken 3 are some of the best playing 3D fighters of that time period. We would see many other great games. If you were an anime fighting game fan, had you covered. With actually the very first Guilty Gear game I ever played. This was also the very first Arc System Works game I ever played. This was my introduction, though the game that would make me become a real fan was Enter Nyan Birth, which would be the next generation. But if you're looking for a solid, anime style fighter of the time period, this is a really good looking game. Hands down, and still plays solid to this day. I'm surprised more people don't actually talk about this game. Also, we would see, of course, many other great games. Of course, I'm sure everyone remembers. Also, Soul Calibur 2, which this was the original version I played, which you could play with, obviously, Spawn. And the fact, this version of the game also could play in 720p resolution, which is kind of insane to think at that time period that this could be done in 720p. Also, we would see many other things, including for many years my personal favorite of the MK series, Mortal Kombat Deception. Now, you had a couple different variant covers. I personally like the Molina cover the most. We would also see underrated games, I think overly hated, that deserve more love than it gets. Games like Capcom Fighting Evolution. Because this was the only way you could play with characters from a arcade game called Red Earth. Which is unfortunately a game that never got released here in the West. Also, we would see some stuff from SNK called SVC Chaos. SNK vs. Capcom. This would also be the introduction of a character called Violent Ken, which would later, of course, come in Ultra Street Fighter 4. Still an interesting game, definitely a hard difficulty, it's definitely an SNK game. We would also see, in my opinion, maybe just about the greatest crossover fine game of all time. And that being Capcom vs. SNK 2. And of course, this would be EO edition. But still, the game plays amazing, it still looks great. And in my opinion, I consider it a must-own game for any Capcom or 2D fighting game fan. Heck, if you're a collector of original Xbox, get this game. Get it while it's still very good in price. Last, I want to save until last two games that will always hold a special place for me, personally. That being Panzer Dragoon Orta and Jet Set Radio Future. This would be the very first game I would ever play on the console. Would be Jet Set Radio Future. I have a very special place in my heart for this game, for the music soundtrack and everything. The same goes for this. This game can also do like 720p resolution, which is incredible. Both these games are masterpieces, and it is sad that neither of these games have really gotten the HD treatment. Though you can play like a upscale version of this through the software and stuff, mod and everything for like Xbox One and stuff, you can run this better for Panzer Dragoon Orta, but unfortunately Jet Set Radio Future still does not have the support it deserves. But with that said, this is just a little look back at the final part of the 6th generation. So leave a comment. What games were your personal favorite? What games do you have a special place for from the original Xbox? With that said, I'll see y'all next time. Stay safe out there with all the craziness going on in this world. And see you again soon of same YouTube time, same YouTube channel.